matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Boom. We are back online. Taylor, welcome to the... I don't know why I'm welcoming you to your own show. Hi, Taylor. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm obviously very confused, but I'm doing well.
But welcome, Fars, and welcome everybody to Doomed to Fail. We are a twice weekly podcast. We bring you historical disasters, failures, interesting stories, and I'm Taylor, joined by Fars.
And we are fine. We're fine. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. I went to a wonderful women's retreat this weekend. It was 3 days of private chef made food and yoga and a sound bath and a massage and a hot tub, and it was amazing.
So I did that, not a ladies retreat, although it actually was mostly ladies. There's a place here in Austin called Miraval, which I think is a Hyatt property, and it's unique in the sense that it's almost like a commune situation where you just stay in these little huts and cabins. They're really nice. It's a really, really nice place. And the entire resort is like cell phoneless, and it's super hush, super quiet, and it just has open spaces for like yoga and meditation and like a pool area. Like it's just very, I don't know, woo-woo-ish. But I thought it was really relaxing. It's really nice. Really nice.
Yeah, I loved it. It was definitely it was run by my friends Caitlin and Jen, and so they have like a whole thing that you do, and we had a bunch of like little sessions and stuff where we talked about ourselves, and it was great.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Very fun. Was that in Joshua Tree?
No, it was near San Diego.
Okay. Nice. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Sweet. So am I going first today?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I have a fun one that's like a little bit different from our normal format, and if I'm being totally real, it took me until I realized that it's Inauguration Day to come up with the idea. Because like, where did all these traditions come from? Why do we do the things we do? And I realized there's like a lot of really cool, fun traditions that has like a lot of like backstories to it that I thought would be interesting to talk about. So
Cool.
We're going to get into inaugurations. And I'm actually going to end on like a really fun, like hate-filled relationship between two former presidents that are not going to be Biden and Trump, ironically.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So, first tradition, leaving a letter for your successor. I'm sure you're aware of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, do you know who started the tradition?
No. I was gonna get someone who died. The two first guesses were people who died. Like they would not have known. I don't know.
It's way earlier than that. So Ronald Reagan was the very first president to do this. And he left a letter for the guy who was his VP when he was president, George H.W. Bush, when he became president. And I think his letter to his successor is probably the funnest out of all of them. And I mean, Reagan was always known to have like a sense of humor. He actually hand drew an elephant surrounded by turkeys. And at the top of the letter, he printed, "Don't let the turkeys get you down." And then he wrote a little nice letter underneath that about like, "Hey, like, welcome to the office. You're going to have a great time. Do all that good stuff." H.W. Bush's letter to Clinton was the first time that it was referenced that a successor's success was the country's success. They say like, we're all rooting for you because your success is the country's success. He was the first one to do that. Interestingly enough, when Clinton left a letter for George W. Bush, he said, quote, "The burdens you now shoulder are great, but often exaggerated." And I was like, how can you say that? You got impeached. Like your wife almost left you. You bombed a pharmaceutical company. You oversaw genocide in Rwanda. And he was like, it's not that tough.
He's a chill guy.
He's a chill guy.
I was like thinking, I was just thinking about Phil Hartman again, I think this weekend, when he's like, warlord attack or whatever. He's like, warlord, while he's like taking fries and
yeah,
cheeseburgers from people in that SNL skit. So
that's the best one.
That's the best
one. But George W. Bush left a really heartfelt one. I think that the one that he left for Obama was probably the most like heartfelt letter out of all of them that we know of. Obama's letter to Trump, it was weird and interesting. Well, it wasn't weird. It was just really, really interesting, some of the
Hmm.
stuff that he said in there, because now that you see where the country is at, you're like, oh, you missed the cues of like what was going on here. Because what he ended up saying in his letter to Trump was he was referring to American leadership in the world, and he goes, "quote It's up to us to sustain the international order." And I was like, "Wait, I think the country's resoundingly decided that we don't want to be like in charge of being the world police at this point." Um, and so, anyway, I thought it was really interesting how he like went that direction with it. It was a long letter, actually. That's
There's
just one piece of it that I kind of
literally
plucked
no
out
way he
of
read
it.
it. Yeah.
Because but mostly I plucked that out of it because that's like people don't want that anymore. Like I don't know. I just thought it was like it was interesting because like it's clear that he just comes from a different frame of reference. And then
I feel
Trump,
like people do want that.
yes, other people want that, but if you're in America, you're like, why don't we just take care of Americans instead of like having wars funded across the world?
Yeah. I mean, we don't,
Like we're not good at it. Like
we don't
in
agree
no
on that as
in
a
no
country.
situation have
There's
we
no
in
thing where like we agree on that. It
yeah like
exists, but it's not like everyone.
I mean, I don't know. I think that going to in Middle Eastern wars probably isn't a good thing to do. I mean, I don't
No, no,
know.
no, I know, but not everybody thinks that way. I don't know. I just feel like it wasn't like full on.
Well, yeah, that's I mean, that's kind of the thing. That's kind of like what I found interesting about it was because like Bush got us into wars, and then the Republicans were obviously super into wars, and then
Hmm.
you have Democrats who I don't know if they were like super into wars necessarily, but they're just like, whatever. This is like the engine that's in motion. Let's keep it going. And I think that's what Obama's referring to in this letter. And it's like, no, we like let's not do that anymore. Like we're not good at it. Like we're not good at invading other countries. We're not good at like trying to do regime changes. But
Hmm.
and then Trump did leave a letter for Biden, and we actually have no idea what he wrote. All Biden would ever disclose is, quote, the president wrote a very, very generous letter because it was private. I won't talk about it until I talk to him, but it was generous.
Oh
Which
my God, it was
I don't
so
know.
stupid.
Yeah, I don't know what he could have wrote in the middle of January 6th that was like so.
No, it's
I imagine what Trump wrote was fuck you, fuck your election,
yeah, exactly. Like I'm or like he's like drew a picture of like a private
middle
part.
finger.
Yeah. And then that was it. If he did it at all, you know. So,
Well, so Trump, I just saw this. I have CNN running in the background. Can you hear
mhm.
that?
I heard that little scratch, squeak.
Okay. Let me know if it becomes super distracting.
Okay, thank you.
Um, Biden did leave Trump a letter. So we know we don't know what it says. I mean, he literally apparently just got to like the Resolute desk, so like we don't know, but there is a letter there apparently. Um, so tradition number two is location. So as with this situation, much has been made about the inauguration location since Trump decided to like mix it up at the very last second. But
Hmm.
the Constitution does not define a location for the inauguration. And some haven't even been in Washington, D.C. So, for example, George Washington, his inauguration was at Federal Hall in New York City, which I don't even know what that is. Do you know
I
what
know
that
where it
is?
is. Yeah, I know exactly where it is. It's downtown. It's like near the World Trade Center. But like DC wasn't the capital then.
Yeah, I don't know when DC was a capital. It doesn't matter. I
I mean,
mean, a
the
lot
capital
there.
was New York, and then it was like then I think maybe Philadelphia, but then DC.
Well, even
So,
later on, when DC was the capital, there was inaugurations that didn't even happen there. Um,
uh, it was made to
so
the capital in 1790.
yeah, well, yeah. Since then, there's been.
No, that's
I'll
when it
get
was
into like
founded.
other ones that didn't happen there. So, um, 1801 is when inaugurations, as like a matter of practice, moved to the U.S. Capitol.
Hmm.
And up until 1981, it was held on the east front, the side that's like a parking lot right now. That's where it was held. it was 1981 was the first time when it was held on the West Front, the one that we're like most accustomed to seeing, when Reagan took the oath of office for his first term there. So, interestingly enough, this is like a very fascinating like indication of like who our politicians are these days. So, when Reagan took that inauguration that moved to the west side of the Capitol on his first term, he was just shy. He was like 30 days shy, or not even that, like 15 days shy of his 70th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
He was the oldest person to assume the presidency
Mm-hmm.
until 2017, when Trump took the oath at 70 years and 220 days old.
Mm-hmm.
Then, 4 years later, Biden took it at 78 years old. And now Trump is taking it at 78 years and 220 days old.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it can't get much, we can't go much further. People don't live
Why
forever.
not? Why not? I mean, what if we end up living to 150? Like maybe we'll have a 100-year
Uh,
old president. Who knows?
I guess. I mean, I would just like, if I would, I don't want to work when I'm 42. Why would I want to work when I'm 78?
Dude, I don't
And I,
know.
and I know, I know I'm like different because I'm like not someone who would do this because you have to be a certain kind of crazy to even do it anyway. But like, man, guys,
I don't
stop
know.
doing
The
this.
Pod
The
Save
fuck?
the Pod Save America guys were like, I think
Yeah.
Biden is quiet quitting because like nobody's heard from him and like like in the last like month or so.
He
They've
did a
just been
bunch of pardons today. What do you mean? He
yeah.
he did a thing about the he did a press conference about the ceasefire. I mean,
Dude, he's been the guy's checked out. He's like, fuck it, I'm done with this. Like
he
I'm
should
leaving
be.
anyways.
Yeah, he
So
should be.
including Trump's second inauguration, seven presidents have been sworn in inside the US Capitol. Reagan was the last one sworn in the Capitol. Well, sorry, they say Reagan was the last one that was sworn in the actual Capitol, the Rotunda, but he was actually privately sworn in at the White House for a second term. Then the actual ceremony was being held in the Rotunda. So, slight deviation there.
Cool.
FDR only had a private swearing in for his fourth term, and Obama did a private swearing in for his second term since January 20th fell on a Sunday that year. So I didn't know that either.
I didn't either.
My favorite thing, inaugural speeches. This is my favorite. So I love this because there's two tacks that presidents take here, which I've noticed. One is they try to unify the country, which is like blah, boring, who cares? The better one, the more fun one, is they use it as an opportunity to just dunk on the previous administration while that previous
Mm-hmm.
administration is sitting right next to them. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that from what I could gather with researching, the kind of break from civility really started with FDR's dig at Herbert Hoover, which is going to be a theme later on. Mostly because Herbert Hoover's presidency was overshadowed by the Great Depression and the
Mm-hmm.
perception that Hoover's failure to address the economy was driven by his fear of the federal government getting too involved in people's lives,
Mm-hmm.
which is why FDR in his inauguration utters the famous line, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." That was like their version of a dunk. Like he was dunking on Hoover, being like, "Hey, this guy was too big of a wuss to take care of our problems, and we're not going to live in fear anymore."
Nice.
JFK also apparently dunked on Eisenhower, who in the buildup to the Cold War took more of an indirect approach. So
Mm-hmm.
JFK at his inauguration said, quote, "Let every nation know whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship." Mostly because he actually addressed Nikita Khrushchev, whereas up until this point, Eisenhower was very much like, no, let's not go face to face with these guys. Like we can just use diplomacy, back channel our way around this. And JFK was the one that came and was like, no, no, the way this guy's running this is not going to work. Let's change it up.
Mm-hmm.
Reagan indirectly addressed Jimmy Carter's perceived government overreach into people's lives by saying in his inauguration that government is not the solution to our problems; it is the problem.
But no, but I know. I'm a government person. I think that the government should help people.
Yeah, of course it should help people. It's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I mean,
They should like
there's
be available to like help people.
yeah, I'm not of the demographic that requires the government to be a part of my day to day life. But
But it
if
is.
if I had a you know huge drug problem and a kid who I couldn't take care of, then yeah, I mean, as a
Yeah,
citizen, I'd want the government to take care of that kid, figure out how to get my shit together, all that
sure, but
good
it's also
stuff.
it's like everything else too, like your ability to get goods from other countries, like your ability to exist. The government doesn't, it's involved in your everyday.
Yeah,
There's a way to do it right. I don't know what that is, but I'm just saying that like
solve
if
it.
J. Edgar Hoover is on everyone else's phone, why shouldn't he be on mine? We just watched
Yeah,
Clue.
yes.
So
Very apropos of this conversation, actually. Um, so my favorite inauguration speech had to do with Trump's first inauguration, where he talked about how the era of
mhm.
American carnage is over. And then George W. Bush leaned over to Hillary Clinton and said, quote, well, that was some weird shit. That was like definitely my favorite moment. Do you remember that?
She laughed at him today. I don't remember.
They seem to have struck up a friendship.
Yeah, I mean, I know someone who works in the government, and they were telling me how surprised they were at how a lot of people who are very against each other publicly or whatever, like they're friends, you know?
So the other fun one is the hand on the Bible thing, which has a lot of really cool history behind it. So swearing in on the with your hand on a Bible, that was started by George Washington, again, not in the Constitution. The only deviations from this are John Quincy Adams, he sworn on a book of law. Teddy Roosevelt didn't use any book when he was sworn in. LBJ was sworn in with his hand on a Catholic missal, which I don't even know what that was, but I guess it's a book of prayers.
Yeah.
And some presidents use their own personal Bibles. Biden used his own personal Bible. Others have used George Washington's Bible. Um, George W. Bush, he wanted to use George Washington's Bible, but apparently, like, obviously, this thing is super old and it's super frail. And his swearing in took place like on a rainy day in DC. And I guess like they told him no, you can't use it, which I didn't even know you could do. I didn't know you could tell a president no to something like that, but I guess you can, which is interesting. Um, Lincoln's Bible also has a story. It was actually owned by a clerk of a U.S. Supreme Court justice and used by Lincoln at his inauguration. Obama also used the Lincoln Bible, as did Trump, although in both of his swearing ins, he had the Lincoln Bible in a protective box, then his family Bible on top of it. And I just found this out, like right before we started recording, that at the swearing in that just happened, he didn't have his
Hmm.
hand on the Bible at all. So
He
Melania
just forgot.
held, you say again?
He just forgot.
Maybe. So Melania held both Bibles up the way she did in the first inauguration, and then he just
Hmm.
had his hand by his side. And you
Yeah.
and you can't actually tell if you watched it on TV, but apparently there's some pictures of him from the side that you can actually see.
Yeah,
So
I've seen them. I think he just didn't pay attention, wasn't really paying attention.
so what is actually required by the Constitution? So the reciting of the oath of office, actually the main thing that's required by the Constitution. And the language used is, quote, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. The so help me God part, that's not in there. That was added by George Washington.
Hmm.
So the other thing defined is timing. So the original timing as defined in the Constitution was March 4th. And then later on, there was a constitutional amendment moving it to January 20th. The reason being that that's a lot of time for a lame duck president, right? Like, I mean, you lose your election in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
November,
You're
and
not
all
doing
of a sudden you get
anything.
like, yeah, we're just going to chill for 5 months. Like, it's
You're not
not
gonna give
good
five
for the
months
country.
notice at your job.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Um, and then if the incoming president doesn't take the oath at the specified time, which is noon Eastern time on the 20th, then the incoming VP would then assume office, is the rules.
Oh, that's fun. Do
So
they, but
go ahead.
they have to be sworn in.
Yes. Yeah.
But they can be sworn in any time.
They could be sworn anytime. That one's not constitutionally defined.
Got it.
So the funniest, not funniest, but the funnest transition of power, in my opinion, was between Herbert Hoover and FDR. Do you know about this?
But you already told me that about the note.
Yes.
Okay, what else?
These two hated each other.
I love that.
Like they, and
It makes me
it's
feel good. It makes me feel good that like I mean, I know that these things have happened in the past and everything happens and whatever we have to continue to be alive, but I do enjoy that. It
it's
does make me happy.
it's just it's funny because as I'm telling you this story, because the story really just paints like Herbert Hoover is like an arrogant dipshit.
I've
But
thought
like,
about learning more about him because I know Hoovervilles, I know
yeah,
like
me
he
too.
was blamed for the depression, I know all of those things, but like yeah, I don't know a ton.
But what's funny is like as I'm telling this story, just remember that FDR, by almost every historian's account, is like a top three president. It's like some
Yeah,
variation of FDR, Washington, Lincoln. Like it's just like they're kind of all in there together, and like it just depends on which historian you're reading about. But the order will change, but it'll be those three for
hmm
obvious reasons.
hmm
So as I'm reading this, like that's who Hoover thinks is like a con artist and like a charlatan. It's really funny. Um, so 3 years. So the election was the election that was between Hoover and Roosevelt was in 1932. 3 years earlier, in 29, is when the stock market collapsed, leading to the Great Depression. And unemployment was at 25%. And exactly what you said. The thing I remember the most about this era from like school was Hoovervilles, which is where people
hmm
would live because they couldn't afford housing. So they would put up shanty towns around the city.
hmm
And Hoover's approach to this was called like the voluntary policy, which was basically um, call up businesses and be like, hey, please don't lay anybody off or lower wages. Just don't do it and we'll be fine. That was his approach, which is like crazy.
hmm
Um, so FDR, who was then governor of New York, he showed up with his New Deal, and he said, "Hey, we can do more." And the reception of the voting populace was huge. He won 57 to 39% over Hoover. Um, FDR basically painted Hoover throughout the campaign as like a feckless and ineffective leader, and it reminded me a ton of like how the Reagan and Carter campaigns kind of size each other up, where Carter was kind of shown as like this like nice guy, but like, is that really who you want to like
Exactly.
rattle a saber? It was one of those deals.
hmm
So one tradition that isn't inauguration related but election related is that the outgoing president invites the incoming president to the White House to talk through major issues. They'll basically be inheriting along with photo ops and show like a peaceful transfer of power. That
hmm
actually starts with Hoover inviting FDR to the White House.
Really,
Interestingly
that's
enough,
fun. Yeah.
yeah. And this was almost seen as an attempt by Hoover to address his issues with FDR's characterization of his economic policies. I don't think this was done because he was trying to be super cool guy like to FDR. Because what ended up happening was that he basically just put FDR in a room and just started lecturing him for an hour about economic policies and why he did the things that he did. And later on, Hoover would tell people that he had been, quote, educating a very ignorant but well meaning young man. That was his perception. And like
That's hilarious.
mostly of what I read of FDR is like he was just like listening to a child have a tantrum and just being like, just go, just keep going. It's fine. Like, just go. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he didn't seem to
Yeah.
engage with it. But it was obvious that Hoover was super upset and pissed about the election. Um,
I wonder if a little bit of it was to be like, look at the White House. It's not wheelchair accessible.
Maybe because there was
You
one story
know?
I read was that he was shocked to see how paralytic FDR was. I guess
Right.
FDR hit it decently well.
hmm hmm
So they barely talk after this one visit to the point where the media took notice and started writing stories about it. They did ride together in the inaugural car ride to the Capitol building.
hmm
And this was, consistently done. There's a picture of this, and from what has been said about this ride, they didn't speak to each other at all. Like they were just like, I'm done with this guy, screw this guy. And it's really
hmm
interesting because it wasn't as like egregious as Trump not accepting election results in 2020, but this was like Hoover saying, "I don't think the American people know what they bought because FDR's campaign lied about me so much that
Hmm.
it was like he got cheated is the sentiment that was coming across the page of
Hmm.
Hoover's perspective of this. Like he didn't think that he actually lost like fair and square. I think he thought like these guys made stuff up about me and lied about me, and
Hmm.
The American people like they needed someone to get in the way of their own decision making. And apparently he spent most of his career trying to disrupt any New Deal initiatives by FDR. Like he was actively trying as a private citizen to like destroy his agenda.
Yeah,
Like that's how badly, that's how convicted he was in his beliefs of what happened here. So really fun, really fun
that's fun.
little grubby little man.
I know. I have no idea what he looks like, but I also feel like he's grubby.
He looks
Let me look him up.
like the Citizen Kane guy
Mm-hmm.
or Orson Welles. He looks like Orson Welles.
He does, yeah.
That's my story.
Cool. Who am I looking at? Oh, I feel like someone else said something about Herbert Hoover today. It was maybe my father-in-law texted me. What did he text me? Have you read this book? Oh, a book about McKinley. He's curious about McKinley. Yeah, that's so, I don't know, so interesting. I wonder, oh my God, it's so funny. You can look up sad Hoover as one of the options when you're Googling a picture of him.
That
He
is
doesn't look
very
sad in
funny.
these. He's kind of cute. I like a round face. Um, but he, you know, um, that's funny. I don't know. Yeah. I wonder I feel like I don't understand. And I know we have some Canadian listeners and I think a couple downloads like over in the UK. Like, I don't understand how in parliamentary systems, the leader is always like, I'm just going to step down today. There's elections next week or whatever.
It is wild.
You know? And like,
But
it's just
yeah,
like, that's like, so different. And ours is like, I don't know. I feel like that's never, I mean, people have stepped down and like whatever, we have like a thing, but you're not like, oh, there's a surprise election coming up like that. That never happens here. So I feel like time to do it. But then also, I don't know if you, I watched like a little bit of when King Charles was coronated, and that is ridiculous.
it is
He like sits,
ridiculous.
he like sits on that rock that like means something. There's like diamonds that like just have so much blood on them, and it's just like, what is happening? You know?
You know what's funny is you as you say that was I did watch the entire inauguration
Hmm.
and I was like, why am I so into this and find it so interesting? Because I
Hmm.
think the exact opposite of the British version, where I'm like, this is just so much pomp and circumstance for like a useless honorific.
Yeah.
like, like I guess that's why. I guess because being president of the United States isn't a useless honorific, but being like king of England is kind of a useless honorific.
Yeah. I mean, you get a lot of money, but yeah, you don't do anything.
But do you get money? I mean, don't they always have money? Like, isn't like
Well,
I don't know.
they just have like $1 billion as just like the family money. I don't know if they have to like give it back if they're not king anymore, but they get money from taxes and like the people pay for like their castles to be cleaned.
Do you have anything for us to read off?
Um, I have a couple of things, I think. I have a message from Nadine in Canada about Canadian bacon, which was like, really funny. She was like, "Do you think that that's what we have instead of bacon in Canada? Because it is not what we have. Like they call regular American bacon side bacon, and that's what they um mean when they say bacon.
Really?
Otherwise, the other stuff, the round stuff, is back bacon, which I imagine is we're talking about where it is on the pig, right? So like the back bacon is the Canadian bacon, and then side bacon is like bacon.
Interesting. Okay, so they do have our bacon then.
They do. Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like why wouldn't they would like have to have it. They would not have it.
No, what if they just export the side to America?
Every single pig in Canada, part of it goes to America for bacon, and Canadians are not allowed to make that part into bacon and have delicious breakfast sandwiches.
I mean, what
It's
if?
it is a tale as old as time. That is part of um, a contract that was signed between the two countries in 1734.
Some sort of a treaty, I'm sure.
Yeah, of the Baconator
Well, thank you, Nadine, for
Treaty.
clarifying
Thank
that.
you. if we ever go. And thank you, Nadine, for all of your tips on. I asked her some questions about visiting Canada, so thank you for answering me there too.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Um, no.
All right. Well,
Oh yeah, thanks. I guess I could sign us out and tell people where to find me. I'm like, I don't know.
yes. Let's do where to
Yes.
find us.
Please. Thank you, friends, for listening. Please tell your friends. Find us everywhere on the internet. We're even on TikTok. It's back. Who knows? Who cares? But tell your friends. We have had people find us on there and like us, and they've been commenting, and I really appreciate that. So at Doomed to Fail Pod everywhere on all of the socials. And thank you for leaving us a review if you've done that too.
Sweet.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you all. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you all. We'll join you again later on this week. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off.